All right, the topic is focus minimization for nonprofit leaders. Let's jump right in, okay? I want you first and foremost to try to think of all the tasks you have to accomplish and all the people you have to interact with throughout your days as a nonprofit leader. And then I want you to imagine those tasks and people as fires, little fires, right? And then I want you to imagine yourself running from fire to fire to fire to try and keep all the little fires burning, right? You're frantically running to each fire and blowing a little oxygen on it, putting another piece of wood on it, and then running off to the next fire to do the same, right? And each fire is doing okay, but none are thriving, right? You don't have the time and capacity to devote to any one fire in particular to make it thrive. And again, you're just doing your best to make sure they all survive. And some of your fires are on their last leg, right? The flames are getting low or they've stopped burning altogether, and all you have is some hot coals that need a lot of tender love and care before they can return to being a healthy, quality fire. And unfortunately, the picture I've painted here is the operating style of most nonprofit leaders. If we're being completely honest, right? Nonprofit leaders often have huge visions and huge hearts, and these are some of their greatest strengths, but they can also be some of their greatest weaknesses, and here's why. To create a world-class nonprofit organization, it's of the utmost importance to say no to a lot of good things so you can say yes to the one great thing, right? So let me elaborate on that. In my early nonprofit days, two issues collided that made me overextend myself and my focus, right? Number one, I just needed help building the organization, right? I needed people, I needed money, and I thought saying yes to every request that came my way would be a good way to keep people happy and create a better chance that they might provide my organization with their help or with their money in the future, right? And I wanted so badly, number two, to make an impact. I just wanted to help people. So I said yes to any opportunity to help that came my way, right? And while these are understandable pain points and passion points, right? The solutions I was using would eventually lead me to a place of mild passion, right? As opposed to overflowing with bold passion and burnout, right? From doing too much and doing too much of the wrong stuff, right? If you watched my video on self-care and self-discovery, you'll remember my sentiments about middle school aged kids, right? I was spending all of my time or a lot of my time interacting with middle school aged kids, and middle school aged kids are not what lights my fire, right? They're not what gives me energy. I was saying yes to a lot of good things, right? It's still great to interact with, help, love middle school kids, but I was saying yes to so many good things that I wasn't able to focus all of my attention on the one great thing. And it's really, really important, especially in the early days of launching a nonprofit, but even later on, right? When you can grow and you can get off track easily, right? You can add too much really easily at times. It's really, really important to become crystal clear on what's most important. Lock in on that thing. Say no to a lot of really good things so that you can accomplish the one great thing, right? And in 2019, during my third year of nonprofit work, something happened that poured gasoline on this sort of overextension fire that I was building, right? I got promoted. And through this promotion, not only was I stretched thin from all of the saying yes that stemmed from the two issues above, but I also inherited 30 board members, right? It was 3 boards, 14 staff, 26 volunteers. I was planning 4 events per year. I had all my communications duties, all my fundraising duties, all my administrative duties, which got larger because I was now a supervisor of a lot of people. My training duties, not only I had to be trained, but I had to train others, right? And so on and so forth. It was overwhelming, right? And I struggled in this position for multiple reasons for a year. And fairly quickly on the front end, I told my boss I'm not feeling it, right? My job had become so much about hiring, firing, helping other areas outside of my local area, and so on, right? And not nearly enough about the things that lit my fire, right? I tried a lot of things to help alleviate the stress and discord, and most of them were in the realm of focus minimization, right? It was new organization tools, delegation of simple tasks, but none of them were extreme enough, right? I made little adjustments here and there, but I would eventually slide back down the slippery slope into my old habits, trying to be the superhero for everyone while forsaking myself, my relationships, and my effectiveness. And in addition to all of this, my wife Melanie and I found out during the fall of 2019 that my oldest daughter, who had been born in the spring of 2018, needed heart surgery. And on December 21st, 2019, she was diagnosed with a genetic disorder called Smith-Magenis syndrome, right? Of course, all of this adds stress and obligations, focuses to the life of a parent. And on top of all of this, at about 6 months into this new promotion and position, right, March of 2020 happened, which we all know what happened there, right? COVID broke out all across the world, and we were all forced to rethink our way of existence and operating businesses, right? And of course, this pivot moment added additional stress for me. And all of this culminated for me during the summer of 2020 in massive stress and internal discord, right? I felt like I was moving farther and farther away from my dreams. I felt like I was turning more and more into a corporate robot, and I felt like the fire within was slowly being suffocated, right? I had to break loose from this. And I remember the week clearly. I came to my breaking point, right? And I dove within. Going back to my self-discovery portion in the previous video. It was sort of a come to Jesus meeting, right, between God and I. And it started out with like a lot of prayer, some journaling and just trying to sort of reflect. But eventually it came to the point where I didn't have any more words, right? I just sat quietly, both externally and internally, right? And I waited. I was like, you know what? Just show me the next right step, right? I will take it. I waited for the still small voice within to show me the right path. And by the end of that week, all I knew was that I wasn't focusing a large portion of my time on doing what I loved. And because of this, I needed to demote myself from that position, right? So I called my boss, told him what I'd discovered, and then leapt into the unknown. And that was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, right? Certainly in my professional career. 6 months later, I launched a sports camp for people with disabilities, which was the first of its kind within the nonprofit that I worked for, and it exploded. Within 45 days of opening camp registration, we had over 100 campers registered. We had over 180 volunteers at this camp. We had over 400 total attendees. We raised over $75,000, which was 3 times the amount we raised in our previous year's fundraising banquet. And the organization I worked for took notice of this camp and said, hey, this is incredible. Let's launch this thing on a global scale, right? And since then, just 5 years after the initial launch of this camp, it has been replicated over 100 times in multiple countries across the world. And I never would have had the capacity to make this dream a reality if I hadn't taken the radical steps to minimize my focus, right? So with that said, speaking of the steps, right, what were those steps? In other words, what's the framework for focus minimization? And for me, it's a 3-part, really simple framework. The first part is what I call the task dump, right? Essentially, take out a whiteboard or a big piece of paper and write down every task, every person, every obligation you have on your plate, right? And don't worry about listing them in order of priority. Don't worry about organizing anything. Just dump tasks, right? And of course, this is going to take some time. But the time is well worth the clarity provided from this activity, right? You'll make up for lost time as you move forward into the clarity that it provides. And after you task dump, number 2 is to prioritize the task in order of what's most important for you and your organization, right? This forces you to make hard decisions. Also, just there are no ties, right? Make a decision. If task X and task Y both need to be accomplished, which one is prioritized over the other, right? Say you've only got 10 minutes, both tasks take 10 minutes. Which one are you choosing? Which wins? Make a decision. And then number 3, now that you have your tasks prioritized, it's time to decide what to keep, what to cut, what to delegate, and what to pause, right? And if you've ever heard of the Pareto principle or the 80-20 principle, if you've ever read that book, this is what we're doing, right? Let me explain the Pareto principle really quickly. The idea behind the Pareto principle is that 20% of your efforts produce 80% of your results. And of course, that means that 80% of your efforts produce 20% of your results, right? And the idea within the book, the 80-20 principle, is that we want to maximize the 20% and minimize the 80%, right? Maximize our amount of time in the 20% of actions that provide the most value for us and our organization, and minimize the amount of time we spend focusing on the 80% of actions that only provide 20% of value and results for us and our organization, right? So what we're doing with our prioritized task list is identifying the 20% that produces 80% of our our results. And we're keeping that, and then we're delegating, cutting, or pausing the rest, right? Does that make sense? So here's an example within my nonprofit, right? And this is just a hypothetical, right? There's nothing true to this, but I might have a task list that looks like this, right? I might have communications and storytelling. I might have board training. Might have accounting and receipt input. I might have receiving and sorting the mail. I might have taking out the trash. I might have attending to the front lines. I might have staff training, self-discovery and self-care, facility tours, right? So I've got all of these things that I'm throwing out on that board. And so what we would do is we'd take this list and we'd first prioritize it. And it might end up looking something like this, right? Number one, self-discovery and self-care, right? Those go at the top, because if I don't take care of my number one asset, which is me, none of the rest will be accomplished. And here's a little secret for you. Every single time you do this, self-discovery and self-care should be at the top. Don't ever prioritize those below anything else, right? And then number two on your list, maybe it's communications and storytelling, right? Those are next, because that's how we raise money. And if we don't do that, we're in big trouble, right? There won't be an organization to have to worry about figuring out what task to do next, right? Number three might be staff training, right? Because we need alignment within our staff, and we need them to feel competent and confident, right? And you'll notice that I couldn't cut any of these three, right? These three tasks can't be cut even if I wanted to, right? Without a major issue arising at some point within my organization. Next, number four might be board training, right? Because we need our board to be equipped to help the organization as well, right? So I keep that as well. And maybe I draw the keep line here. I say, this is my 20%. This is all I can handle. I must delegate, pause, or cut the rest. And be conservative in your estimates of your own capacity, right? Leave margin. It will fill up. And eventually you'll have to engage in this process again, right? I recommend quarterly check-ins and updates, right? Organizations are like people. We accumulate stuff. And so you have to, just like you have to get rid of stuff if you don't want to have a house that looks like a hoarder's house, you have to get rid of it, quarterly, yearly, whatever it is. You have to do the same thing in organizations. You have to engage in this concept of focus minimization consistently, so that you don't end up with piles of stuff that are taking up all of your concentration, focus, and energy, right? Okay, so if we have all of that above the keep line, now let's get to the delegate, pause, or cut tasks, right? Maybe we say it's time for us to find a board member or volunteer who can help with the accounting, right? So we're going to delegate the accounting. And then maybe we say this whole having the executive director sort the mail and take out the trash thing is probably not great for our long-term sustainability. Let's pass these tasks off to someone else, right? So let's delegate that as well. And maybe we say, as much as I want to visit the front lines right now, I need to focus on some other things that are more important. So let's press pause on that until next quarter, right? And then lastly, maybe we say these facility tours take up a lot of time and energy, and they don't provide much value for our organization, right? Let's cut those, right? Let's cut those for now. We can circle back to them at a different time, right? And anyways, that's just an example of how this could work out for you and your organization. I hope it makes sense on your end, right? This focus minimization framework can really cut back on your level of overwhelm and exhaustion, right? If you find that you're constantly overwhelmed and exhausted, there's a really good chance that what you need to do is engage with this focus minimization framework, right? It can inject balance back into your nonprofit endeavors and make your job far more enjoyable. And beyond all of that, it can provide you with the margin you need to make your nonprofit dreams a reality, right? Going back to my example of demoting myself and finding the capacity, the time, the margin to really lock in on what was deepest in my heart, right? That which drove my passion, which was a sports camp for people with disabilities. All of that, right? The focus minimization gave me the capacity to be able to run at that with everything I had and make it a reality, right? And if we return to the little fires everywhere illustration I provided at the beginning of this video, we can see how focus minimization helps us to build one or just a few really hot, thriving fires, right? And it gives us the capacity to focus the necessary energy on each fire so we can bring it to the point of thriving rather than being pulled away from each fire by other fires so that they're all, just surviving. And then once we have one or a few thriving fires, we can allow them to grow organically into other areas and to spread like fire does to the point where it creates other thriving fires, right? But we can't put the cart before the horse, right? We have to stay focused on what's most important rather than diluting our efforts by focusing on too many things, even if those things are good, right? We have to say no to the good so we can say yes to the great. Does that make sense? All right. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, follow, or subscribe. All of those actions help me reach more people with this message. And if you haven't already done so, join the Nonprofit Growth Mastery Facebook group that I run. It contains other resources similar to this to help nonprofit leaders thrive and create thriving nonprofits. And lastly, if you're interested in diving deeper into the topic of focus minimization and truly making genuine, lasting, substantial progress in this realm, and many others that are absolutely necessary for your success in the nonprofit space, check out my online course, right? You can find more information about this on our website under the Our Products section. The product is entitled the Boom Package, right? Which is the online course. It's an online course workbook, coaching from me, and an online community of nonprofit leaders who are traveling the same path as you. They understand you and can provide you with wisdom and encouragement as you seek to make your nonprofit dreams a reality. All right. Otherwise, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service. Take care, friend.